Hi, I'm John Kursky, and in this video, I'm going to show you that if you see this best practice in Power Query Lint, how to make your SharePoint list refresh faster in Power BI. All right, so before we get started, if you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on all the features and capabilities we'll be putting out in the next week and months. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the SharePoint connector. If you worked with SharePoint over the years, you know that you can grow your SharePoint list very large, or your customers are creating very large SharePoint lists. And for example, up on the screen here, if I go to my list settings, I've got an example list that's well over 10,000 items. And I've seen much larger implementations than this. SharePoint lists are used to manage business processes, and it's our responsibility to import that into Power BI to provide insights. Well, over time, those SharePoint refreshes are probably slowing you down. And so if I'm using a Power BI report here, I'm using the native connector, and if I copy this and I put this in Power Query Lint, paste the code, you may see this message: consider using OData instead of the SharePoint list connector. Well, from my experience and from several implementations, OData's implementation can be much faster. Now, why is that? Well, first of all, SharePoint is, at least the native connector, is quite greedy. So it tries to pull all the columns, including a lot of the hidden ones, when it's importing that data. And more data going over the wire slows down refreshes. Second is its paging threshold is very low considering what you can pull out of it. So usually it's set up by the list settings, so it's like 200 or 300. And so if you've got thousands of records, that's more round trips that the SharePoint connector is making over the SharePoint connection to pull data over. So that slows down. So with those two in mind, that can slow down your refresh. Whereas OData, you can augment OData to just pull the columns you need and set a paging threshold. The only problem with OData is understanding the SharePoint API's OData implementation. So if you've ever had to work with internal names, or you've ever had to work with lookup columns, that can be problematic. So let me show you how you can switch over to OData without having to learn all the syntax. So one of the things we provide is a free template called a faster, easier way to import SharePoint list data. And if you go to the releases here, you will see a PBIT file. And you can copy that PBIT file or download it. And when you open it up, you'll get a screen that looks similar to this. It's going to ask you for a SharePoint URL and a list name. And so I've already copied this to Notepad. This is the SharePoint list that has over 10,000 records, the site and the list. And if I hit load, it's going to pull the metadata information to help you understand what OData query you can build. And as soon as this finishes, I'm going to show you how to actually extract the OData feed. All right, so I'm going to go into Power Query now, and it moved it to another screen, so let me drag that over. And you're going to see a couple of functions and tables here. Now, what we built in this template is a way that it extracts the metadata about the columns on the list so that you can choose which columns you want. And the result is, if you go to list fields, you can get a representation of all the lists. Now that my preview says it's old for some reason, let me just pull this again. And you can pick which columns you want. And these are all the visible columns. So let's say I really only want to get the ID, the last name, the IP address, and the modified date. So if those are the only columns, that reduces the amount of data going over the wire. And if I go to the results area, you'll see that only those columns are pulled. And so, all right, that's the data I need. Well, how do I get the OData query? Well, we built a parameter here that you can click on that identifies what you need to copy here. And there's some important pieces here. So this does the translation of which fields you need to pick, and also understands when there's lookups in that, how to modify this. So you don't need to learn it. Also, it identifies the paging. Now, by most setup with SharePoint Online, you have 5,000 item limit that you can pull at any time. Well, the nice thing about this is if I explicitly say, hey, get as much data you can in one data pull, then try again. And instead of having to do this maybe 10 times, it does it maybe 2 times. So less round trips increases the refresh, or lowers the refresh time and increases the performance of your model. So what you can do then is just copy this OData. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to go back to my SharePoint implementation and go to OData. Let me do that just one more time. I just go to New Source, I go to OData, and I'm going to paste that URL. And then I hit OK. And then you can update the field names, which is quite trivial, but that will speed up your refresh. And notice that it's just got the fields I want. The refresh looked a little quicker. And I'm going to show you up on the screen just an example of a 5,000 item implementation, just the difference between the SharePoint V1, V2, and or the OData connector, and the differences. Now, for me, when we apply this best practice on Power BI reports, I've seen it where refreshes that take up to 30 minutes to an hour can get down to less than a minute, which is incredible when, if you want folks have the expectation that if you are making updates to your SharePoint list, the Power BI report should reflect those changes very quickly. And if they're having to wait 30 minutes to an hour, that's unacceptable. If you can keep it under a minute, that's great. So I hope you learned something about making your SharePoint lists refresh faster in your Power BI reports. And stay tuned for our videos. We're going to talk about more rules and more features over the next couple weeks, and appreciate your time. Thank you.